Aloha! Thanks for joining me. I'm JayDreamerZ, and today on my channel, we're talking about the Pillars of Hercules. So thanks for joining me. I see everybody in the chat. Good to see you all. Before I jump into the actual presentation, let's talk about the pillars. We've gone over the pillar subject quite a few times on my channel already. We've talked about the sky pillars, the sky beams. Let's go over a few different words for these pillars that we have here. Poles, and these are all like sacred objects all throughout history and time. We've seen that there tends to be this worship or reverence for mighty, majestic, huge towers and poles and things like that. And tomorrow we're actually breaking down part 2 of The Lord of the Rings, which is the Two Towers, which is directly related. So some words include poles, columns, beams, arrows, staffs, nails, reeds, sky beams, beanstalks, stairways, tractor beams, blue beams, rods, towers, and more. Let's talk about the Pillars of Hercules. This is a pretty popular tale. Usually whenever it comes to these ancient myths and legends, I find that people just glean tiny little bits and pieces of the actual story. Hercules erecting these 2 pillars at the ends of the earth is one of those stories that we glean from. Hey, what's up, TP and Tree? I see you there in the chat. Good to see you. All right, so let's check this out. The Pillars of Hercules. Where shall we begin? These are just all examples that you see over here. I threw up some symbolic imagery of the way that these pillars have been portrayed. Now, on my channel, I've mostly focus on one pillar, or I have been lately mostly focusing on just the one pillar, which is the blue beam or the tree of life or the fountain of youth that springs up and shoots up out of the ground every other apocalyptic cycle that we go through. This is directly related because I believe that the source is the exact same for these other beams that exist. So I'll give it to you in short. Essentially, these pillars and these beams are the vril, or the world energy, or the plasma that exists within the hollows of the earth that shoots outward and comes up through inner earth cavernous openings all around the world, right? The beam, or the beam of light that emits from these caves, or these entrances, will be less spectacular depending on the size of the actual exit from the earth itself. So the largest beams that people see up in the sky will be from the largest exits from the earth itself. All right, now let's take a look. I'm going to do some screen sharing real quick. Let me make sure. I have a lot of screens pulled up right now because I'm also breaking down part 2 of The Lord of the Rings. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Let's get rid of these images. As you can see, by the way, I just want to tell you, the reason I have all these images up is I would like you to see that in all of these images, it's columnar symbolism. 2 columns on each side. As you can see right here, these are great examples. There's a website that has millions of these examples we're going to check out as well. But there's usually some sort of a God, Savior, Christ-like or type of figure that is holding on to 2 staffs or 2 objects, 2 poles, 2 columns, whatever it may be, one in each hand on each side of the body. You're going to see that a lot as we go. So that's why I put all those up there. Let's go ahead and take those down real quick. And let's share some information here so you can see what I'm looking at. There we go. All right, we're going to start on the Pillars of Hercules. Let me go ahead and just... let me scooch myself. Scooch. Okay. That way you can see it a little better. I know I'm like right in the middle of the screen here. So the Pillars of Hercules. Now, I want to show you something real quick. In school, in academics, this is what they teach. See that rock right there? That's called the Rock of Gibraltar. It's just a hill. It's just a mountain. Well, it's not just a mountain. It's not just a hill. It's never just anything. But it is a mountain or a hill that is on the Mediterranean. And this is kind of what we're told that, oh, well, this rock right here, this little mountain, this is what is referred to as people thought that this was one of the pillars, right? Why? Because if we go to the Mediterranean Sea empties out between 2 different lands into the Atlantic, right? And so they just assume that one side where the land is, where this Rock of Gibraltar happens to be, is one of the Pillars of Hercules. I'll explain that in just a minute. And then, of course, on the other side, there should be some sort of matching pillar or column, which there isn't one. And they debate on which one of the mountains is symbolic of this column that Hercules erected. I absolutely believe that this is not the original Pillars of Hercules whatsoever. I believe that what happened is, if we go back in time to the land at the North Pole that once existed at the North Pole, and this sort of magical island that has been lost to us since it has disappeared, that was where the ends of the earth were. That was the end of this realm before you go further and you enter into another realm, which is going into the earth, or take the portal that leads up into the sky. We'll talk more about that in another time. But basically, I believe that what happened is, whenever those native inhabitants, or those who became accustomed to living at the North Pole or at Hyperborea, the land beyond the poles, etc., the lands of the gods, the mountain of the gods, all of those things, they left, right? There was a mass migration to that land for safety, and because it was the best land of all of them, and so people migrated to it. It was very easy to go there because there's a giant blue beam shooting up into the sky during a time of darkness, so people went to the blue beam. But after a while, they had been forced away from that land. Some cataclysm forced them away from the North Pole area, so they spread out. What they did is they took all of their real history and their facts and their ways of life and their traditions and the actual things that had happened to them and to the earth during the times that they lived there. Some people refer to this as the time before the moon. Actually, they took all of these stories that actually happened, and they brought them with them during their migrations to other lands. So, for example, right, speaking of the Rock of Gibraltar, this is today assumed to be one of the Pillars of Hercules. However, before it was in Gibraltar, it was actually assumed to be, most people thought of Italy before this became popular. And in Italy somewhere, there were supposed to be the Pillars of Hercules, right? So these places are named on top of existing places, paying homage to the old places, if that makes sense. All right, so basically, I don't think this is anything like the Pillars of Hercules whatsoever. But let's check it out. Let's check out what it says here. Okay, so according to Greek mythology, Hercules had to perform 12 labors or 12 works, right? Let me give you a little backstory on why he's doing these 12 works. Basically, there was this goddess, Hera, which he's named after, Heracles, right? And she drove Hercules insane. Okay, so she amplified his energy, he lost his mind, became plasma possessed, and killed his own family. So, to make atonement for this, because he felt bad when he came to his senses, when he was doing it, it was all justified. He assumed he was killing his enemies. His perception had been forcibly changed. So, after he came to his senses and realized that he had just killed his family, he set off to go do these 12 labors to sort of work off his karma, I guess you could say, right? These 12 quests that he was sent on. And one of these quests, one of these labors, was to fetch the cattle of Geryon, of the far west, and bring them to Erytheia. And this marked the westward extent of his travels. Okay, so he went westward. Now, I believe, based on my research, that our cardinal directions used to be way different than they are today. Okay, I know we're so used to northeast, south, and west on this plane of existence that we live on. But for me, there's really more like just north and south, basically. And then east and west are more of up and down directionals, because you can go inside of the earth, which means you're going westward, or you can go eastward, which is going up into the sky as well. So there's other ways to look at the directions or to interpret them as well. So basically what happened is he went to go get these cattle of Geryon. Geryon was this, I believe, a 3-headed monster or something that lived on this magical island. And he had these beasts, okay? They call them cattle. And so we assume they're just cows, right? Why would he need to go all the way to some magic island to get some cows when there's cows everywhere, right? They're not cows. These were something other than cows. Now, it's very possible, my guess is that they were, if they were some sort of cattle, that they were more likely to be like woolly mammoths or something gigantic like that, right? Because mammoths are said to have lived in the hollows of the earth as well and to come out near the North Pole area. All right, so basically whenever he gets there, he sets up these columns and he marks it as being the ends of the earth. This is the furthest I have ever gone, which is really interesting because Sam says that to Frodo in the movie too. Let's see here. These are commonly referred to, these pillars that he sets up. There's usually two, but I'm going to also show you the exception, which is even more interesting. The pillars are typically called the gates, right? This is a passage. This is a gate. These are signs, two pillars that shoot up into the air that act as a door or a doorway, letting you know if you go past this, you're entering into another realm. You're going into another world. You are leaving this world and the edge of the known world, basically, right? So he goes out and he sets these up. Sometimes whenever making like sculptures of the Pillars of Hercules or Heracles, people will put these words, ne plus ultra, or non plus ultra, which means nothing further beyond. Sometimes they took away the non and they put plus ultra, which means further beyond. There's more beyond. This harkens to Admiral Byrd whenever he was talking about traveling over the poles, and he talked about lands beyond the poles, which is very interesting too. So sometimes it's known as nothing further, and sometimes it's known as go further, basically. Let's see here. This is really interesting too. So in Syria, there's some writings that refer to the Pillars of Hercules as not being two, but three beams that shot up into the air to hold up the sky. Here's an example. It says, scholars were aware of the pillars through their efforts to translate Greek scientific works into their language as well into Arabic. The Syriac compendium of knowledge known as the Kataba Delat Kol Elan, the cause of all causes, is unusual in asserting that there were three, not two, columns for Hercules that he erected. The columns, the Pillars of Hercules, are also mentioned in Dante's Inferno. Basically, it says that the captain that was going on this journey, Ulysses, justifies endangering his sailors by the fact that his goal is to gain knowledge of the unknown. So he thought in this book, in this fictional book, that if he goes past the Pillars of Hercules, he will somehow gain esoteric knowledge, which is also very interesting. And I believe that there's some truth to that too, based on the energetic principles at play closer to the North Pole, and even more so when you get inside of our world. It's also mentioned and referenced in Sir Francis Bacon's Novum Organum. The pillars appear prominently on the engraved title page of The Great Renewal, as you can see right here behind me. See, there you got the two pillars or two columns shooting up into the sky, and they pass right between the doorway. It's also represented in various forms of architecture. Many different coat of arms actually has this too, right? So they'll put the two pillars or the two columns. As you can see, this one says plus outre. Sometimes they put those words on there too. This one actually has the tree of life right there in the middle. So you've got one on one side, one on the other side, and one great one right there in the middle. The two on the sides acting as sort of support beams or witnesses to the one that is in the middle. So they put these two columns there, and it's quite extensive where they put so many of these. Sometimes they'll actually put a figure of Hercules or something right there in the middle. Lots of examples of these online where you can see the two different pillars. Sometimes Hercules is seen as pulling them down. Sometimes he's seen as pushing them apart or erecting them, putting them back together. One thing I will say, hold on, let me jump back into the chat. I totally lost my mind. Yes, if you want to get my attention in the chat too, just type in Jay, like been sleeping too long did. Hey, how's it going? Lost Knowledge, what's up? Escape from Babylon. It's a dead giant. Ooh, okay. Interesting. All right, let's go back to the presentation here. All right, so where were we? We're talking about the pillars that shoot up. All right, let's move on from that one. Oh, so this is the place that Hercules was headed to, right? He was headed to this place called Erytheia. The Red Isle, or the Red Island, was an island located in the far western stream of the Earth-encircling river Okeanos, which is where we get ocean from, right? Now, this Earth-encircling river could be a reference to the stream or the current that comes up out of the world and encircles the North Pole, basically creating a sort of constant storm at the North Pole as well. And ancient legends talk about how there's a current, a very strong current that goes around the North Pole. That could be in reference to this right here. And it says that the island was bathed red by the light of the setting sun. Well, that could be twofold. One, because of the red sky that appears during every other polarity shift that we have. Or it could be in reference to the light of the setting sun. If you're at the North Pole and the sun is, off in the distance, just going in a circle around you, then it's constantly sort of a setting sun. Or could be, depending on the times of the year and stuff, right? So this is the island that he was going to, right? It's like the edge of the earth. If this was the Mediterranean, right? Like, this is Hercules. He's a god, and the gods got around. They went around the whole world. They could turn into birds. They had craft. They had all kinds of stories and legends indicate that the gods had transportation. Okay, it's not like the gods were limited to just walking around on the ground and exploring their local regions, and they were stuck there. So why would Hercules build these two pillars indicating the edge of the known world in the Mediterranean? You know what I mean? Between two different continents or whatever. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Especially since these exact same gods are also personified and referenced in different names and different cartoonifications all worldwide across times. So they have other versions of Hercules here in the Americas. The Native Americans have their versions of Hercules or Heracles or Samson and all these other super strong superhero types, right? That held up the sky typically at some point in time. So yeah, he's going to this island to try to get these cattle or whatever they were. And there's something called the Cave of Hercules as well. If there is a beam shooting up out of the ground, and if it is light that is shooting up out of the earth and emanating from the earth itself, stands to reason there should also be a cave, right? There's always a cave of the gods, the cave of the saviors, the cave of whatever. The Caves of Hercules is an archaeological cave complex. So now here's an actual cave called the Cave of Hercules. Does this mean that it is the Cave of Hercules? No, it could have just been applied to this local cave, right? But I did want to read the legends. The legends are what interest me the most. It says that the cave was long thought to be bottomless. Ooh, so it must be. All of these cave systems, if they have this energy and this light that is coming up out of them, they must be bottomless. They must connect to the source so that that energy can flow throughout them, sometimes even carving the cave even larger itself, and reach the surface level where we are, right? So it has to be bottomless. And you'll see this too. We'll see this tomorrow in the movie when you see the wizard fighting the dragon or whatever. They fall through this bottomless pit. Let's see here. It talks about how they assume it was the Strait of Gibraltar. We already talked about that. Mythological tradition holds that the Roman god Hercules stayed and slept in this cave before doing his 11th labor to get the golden apples. I think that the golden apples are representative of plasma balls, that there's so much energy inside of the earth or whatnot. When you go into these caves and stuff, you'll see what they call sacred bees or these ball lightning, basically just floating around. But they typically look for the byproduct and the residue that this ball lightning leaves, so that they can eat it, and it improves their health immensely and maybe even helps them to live longer. Here we go. This is a really interesting story. So we're talking about these beams, right? These sky beams that are said throughout history to hold up and keep apart the sky from the earth. It keeps the sky from falling down onto the earth itself. And one of the most popular gods that held up the sky, or titans, his name was Atlas or Atalos. Atl means basically serpent-like, right? Like a serpent, something that slithers or moves like a serpent. Doesn't mean that it is a snake per se or a lizard, but it is serpent-like. Atl, A-T-L. Atl os is oz, which means strength, strong. So strong serpent or strong and serpent-like was Atlas, who held up the sky. Did not hold up a big globe or hold up the earth on his shoulder or anything crazy like that. I don't even know where that came from. That's ridiculous. He held up the sky. And he kept the sky from crashing down onto the earth, which was a real fear that people have had since time immemorial, even to this day, for good reason, I would say. I mean, I don't know. I don't recommend being scared or anything, but there's some truth to that. The Greek mythology version says that it was Hercules who went to Atlas, or Atlos, and offered to hold up the heavens, while Atlas got the apples from the garden of his daughters. Now, this is also apples in a garden, right? Just like in the Garden of Eden, you've got the apple and they bit it and stuff. There's these apples. There's golden apples or whatever. And it was guarded by a dragon. Of course, there's always a dragon guarding these types of places because it is where the plasma comes down from above. That's the sky dragon. Upon his return with the apples, however, Atlas attempted to trick Hercules into carrying the sky permanently. So basically, Hercules needs to get these apples. He sees Atlas holding up the sky and he's like, hey, bro, I'll make you a deal. I'll let you take a break and I'll hold up the sky while you go get the apples for me, and then I'll give the sky back to you. Atlas comes back and he's like, yeah, about that. This is kind of nice. Maybe we could like change our deal, basically. So Hercules, knowing what's going on, he's no fool. He's like, oh yeah, okay, that's fair. That sounds good. I'll hold this up a bit longer. Can you just hold it real quick while I tie my shoe? I'm making this part up, okay? I'm paraphrasing. But Atlas is like, yeah, okay, no problem, I got it. Boom, holds up the sky, and now he can't let go. So Hercules takes off, right? He tricks him. So it's interesting though, because Hercules, for at least a moment or two, he holds up the sky, right? There are many sky gods and goddesses throughout time that are referred to. And Hercules is actually one of them, holding up the sky. So how does he hold up the sky if he's just a little guy? He's a little human guy that's part God, part human. And he's 6 feet tall. No, we're not talking about a humanoid being in the flesh. We're talking about something that is capable of connecting from the ground to the sky, which is a beam of light that shoots up and spreads out. We're going to show you that here in a minute too. All right, so yes, that was an interesting story. Let's see. Let me jump back into the chat here. Kevin Kruger says, Jay, I got to call next campfire and tell you about my super vivid plasma apocalypse dream. Okay. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Can't wait to hear that. Zoe says, JayDreamerZ, on my family coat of arms, it says, in souvent la vérité, which means following the truth or follower of truth. I was just researching it. That's pretty cool. Right on. All right, cool. Let's get back to the presentation. Let's see what was next here. I think we finished up this one, the whole cave thing. Oh, this is the website I wanted to share with everyone. It's called richardcasaro.com, and appropriately enough, it's named after this guy right here. While doing my research about the imagery of these 3 beams shooting up from the North Pole, right? And obviously there's a plasma volcano at each one, right? There's a huge one right in the middle, and there should be, if this is true, 2 other mountains, basically real like plasma volcanoes off to the side of the lands at the North Pole, which I can show you on a map, and I will too. So anyways, I was looking up the imagery for this, and I came across this website, richardcasaro.com. He's got many images of this. He's done a lot of good research. I believe, if I read the website correctly, I just kind of skimmed over it a little bit, but I believe that he might apply, some symbolic imagery to this right here. This shape of the God figure standing in the middle and then holding on to something on either side is seen in many different countries. As you can see, all these various examples of it. He calls it the GodSelf icon. I would just refer to this personally as like the 3 beams or whatever. It doesn't really matter what name you're going to slap onto it. It is what it is, regardless of whatever we name it, right? But there's many different examples of this figure that stands in the middle and it appears to be holding on to these two columns or these two pillars or these two branches or these two straight lines, whatever they may be. Sometimes they're actually seen as and drawn as snakes, as they were in ancient Egypt and in Peru. Sometimes they're other things too. And sometimes the symbolic imagery goes pretty deep, as you can see with the three doorways and the pyramids and the houses of fire. Here's some other really good examples too. There's lots of them. As you can see, this guy's got quite a collection here. Highly recommend checking out his website. I'll give him a shout out one more time, just because I appreciate that I didn't have to go research and pull up all those images. It's Richard Casaro. RichardCasaro.com. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next thing. Now, here's a mention of Hercules from a scholar named Diodorus. Diodorus mentions that Hercules put the pillars in place as a monument to himself, right? He erected these pillars, one on each side of him. He also adds that Hercules either narrowed the passage in order to prevent sea monsters from the Atlantic to enter into the Mediterranean, or to actually open the mountain so that the Atlantic could mingle with the Mediterranean. Now, this is under the assumption that it is near the Rock of Gibraltar or whatever. But then he says, everyone shall think as they please. So it doesn't mean that it is in that particular area. The creation of the pillars. After killing Medusa, Perseus took off the head of the Gorgon. And he took it with him to distant lands and reached the western end of the earth, where the sun sets, the land where Atlas, the Titan, resided and raised magical golden apples. Perseus wished to rest in Atlas's garden and asked him for food, but Atlas, fearing that the hero would steal his magical fruit, refused and sent Perseus away. Perseus then showed Atlas the head of Medusa, and the Titan turned into a giant mountain. Atlas, the one that is holding up the sky, which is represented as a giant human, but it's really just the plasma, the beam that shoots up and branches out towards the sky, holding up the sky. They say that Atlas was changed into a mountain. So where Atlas once was, instead, there is no Atlas. That beam is gone. It's been retracted, and now they find a mountain. So they say Atlas has changed into a mountain because it comes up out of the mountain, right? So he shows him the head of Medusa. The Titan turned into a giant mountain, his hair turning into a great forest, his shoulders into cliffs, and his bones into solid rock, which is very possible. Petrification as an ancient cosmic weapon. There's evidence for that all across the world, that ancient life has been petrified, turned into solid rock, time and time again. Hey, Jake. What's up, Jake? I see you. Good to see you. Thank you. It's good to see you. Kevin Kruger says, I love the presentation so far. Super interesting. You always present the best info. Pillars always get me thinking. I think pillars are one of the most underrated topics in esoteric symbolism I've ever come across. I believe they're crucial. Like the word crucial even comes from the cross or the beam or the stauros that comes up and has a cross beam on the top. Anyway, let's see what we got here. The naming of the pillars. When Hercules had to perform 12 labors, one of them was to fetch the cattle of Geryon, as we talked about, and bring it to the magical island. On his way to the island, he had to cross the mountain that was once Atlas. So Atlas was turned into the mountain, right? And he had to cross that mountain. Now check this out. This is where things start to get really interesting. Instead of climbing the mountain, Hercules split it in half using his indestructible mace, or pillar, or beam of wood, right? Same thing. So he, splits the mountain with his indestructible mace. In doing so, he connected the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea and formed the Strait of Gibraltar, according to popular belief. One part of the split mountain is currently called Gibraltar. The other one is Monte Hacho, etc. Anyways, so the important part I want you to take away from that is that he split the mountain with his club. This guy that held up the sky, right, got to this mountain that was once Atlas, right? And he splits it in half. And now it's known as the Split Mountain, which is very interesting to me. Here's an example, right? This is one of the older movies. This guy also used to play the Incredible Hulk in the old TV shows. Yeah, it's Lou Ferrigno. Basically, he was like the generic Arnold Schwarzenegger. But he was in this movie, and this is him splitting this mountain in half. Now, this is very interesting. I don't believe, so far in my research, that the split mountain, one on each side, is actually the pillars themselves. I believe that the mountain, which is the plasma volcano at the middle, might actually split because the earth itself during these cataclysms may be inclined to grow outwards, causing a split in Rupus Negra, or in the mountain itself. And then in the middle, it's appropriate that you would see the savior figure, the hero, the god, symbolically the blue beam in the middle, going up, creating the T formation, or the cross, or whatever, the crossbar, the hammer, the axe, all these different ones, the double-headed axe, all those things, right? Now, check this out. This is really interesting. So here's some Arabic up here in the translation. I'm going to read this. It says, many have dared to travel within the great sea, Ocean, or the ocean, and have gone about it for some months at a time, but they still have not found the edge of its limit. For there are some islands in it, some of which abound in people, some of which only have strange animals, which are not seen elsewhere. There, at the edge of the world, is an island, Gadira, where Hercules, the hero and the prophet of the pagans, set up 3 columns, those that are famous in the world, high pillars, so that his commemoration, along with his memory, might be brought into all generations of the world. These 3 columns that he set up at the border of the inhabited world, and if it happens that a ship is propelled there by the force of the winds, the sailors give up hope for their lives, since they would be then unable to return from there, the whirlpool of the sea, that is, because boats continuously rush out, and the whirlpool, they rush out at the whirlpool, and they cannot return. So let me break this down real quick. In the middle of the world, around the North Pole, is traditionally said to be a whirlpool, or a very strong current of the ocean water, right? And what this is saying is that when these sailors saw those pillars, they knew not to get too close, or they would get sucked into that current that's spinning around at the top of the world. And it was difficult for them to get out of that current. I'm sure that there's ways to do that, but that's basically what this is saying here. So it says that he erected these 3 pillars, these 3 columns, so that the world would remembering who Hercules is, right? Even his name, Hercules or Heracles, contains the root word har, which means mountain, which is also the root word for Armageddon, or the mountain Har Megiddo of Megiddo. Very interesting. It's also the root for Hermes, and Hermes, thrice great, right? Har means mountain. Mis or mish means pulled up out of the water, essentially. Okay? So Hermish or Hermes means mountain out of the water, which perfectly describes the plasma volcano at the middle of the world, commonly known as Rupus Negra or Mount Meru. Here is a good example of the story personified as Jesus, and the other 2 beams right next to him, right? He's got to have these 2 witnesses on either side. There are these other 2 beams. Now remember, we can look at the people, or we can look at the beams. The people give us an indication of what type of energy those beams contain, right? There's different ways to look at it too. But anyways, this is the story, the 3 beams shooting up into the air. I want to show you a picture that I drew. I am trying to keep my eyes on the chat too. Alex is in the chat and says, nothing is a coincidence. I think that we all have different bits of the puzzle and are slowly bringing it all together. Very good. I agree. Well said. Well said, Alex. All right, now check this out. I want to share this picture that I drew. Just sort of spitballing, going back to the drawing board, as they say. Here we have sort of a skyline with some mountains and stuff. I drew the main beam right there in the middle. Okay, so this beam in the middle represents Mount Meru. This is what you would see from a distance. And obviously, the further away from this you get, the smaller it would look. And depending on the angle, it might look a little bit different depending on where your location on the Earth is, right? But everyone worldwide should be able to see this light that shoots up from the middle of the world and hits the sky. Now, that light shoots up from Mount Meru, and this is plasma, and it's repelled by a magnetic force, a strong magnetic current, right? The top of our world, the sky, contains, I believe, a strong magnetic current, a strong magnetic force that pressurizes our world, that keeps our world pressurized. When this beam of plasma shoots up from within the Earth after the polarity shift, and the energy of the world is no longer coming down from above, but it's wrapping around our world and going up and over us, the energy from inside shoots up. It hits that magnetic barrier up there in the sky, and it spreads out. Or it is repelled from it and shoots outward like that, and it creates what looks like what they call tent pegs, right? A tent peg is something that it looks just like this, and they would tie a rope around it, and then they would hit it down into the ground to fasten the tent or the house to the ground, right? To keep it on the ground. And then whenever you get 3 of these tent pegs, you get this imagery that we get in our stories here, right? These tent pegs are also the root word in the Proto-Indo-European is pag. That's where you get pagan, or those of the pag, or the peg, or the hook, or the nails, right? This extends into different symbolism. The numerical equivalent for the nail or the tent peg is the number 6. So this is actually 666, as you can see right there. Or 3 tent pegs in a row. The 4 pillars, here's another one too. There are many pillars. There are many world pillars. There are many giant, huge trees of life, I believe, that may come out in various places around the world. But 3 main ones, and then 1 prominent one between the other 2, right? Here's the story of the 4 pillars. And it says, we're talking about one of the titans whose name is Hyperion. Of Hyperion, it says that he was considered one of the 4 pillars that hold the heavens and the earth apart. And since his daughter was Dawn, he was probably the pillar of the east. The other 3 pillars were his brothers, Coes, the pillar of the north, Crius, the pillar of the south, Iapetus, the pillar of the west. These 4 titans were the ones that held their father Uranu in place, while Kronos castrated him with a sickle, right? So these 4 pillars are holding up the sky symbolically while everyone's watching this cosmic apocalypse happening, trying to figure out what's going on, right? They see a story playing out in their head. So these 4 pillars are shooting up, holding up the sky, holding up Uranu as Kronos, the new hero of the story, comes in with the sickle, which is also the same thing as the cross, which is also the same thing as Thor's hammer and all this other stuff, and is seen as cutting open the sky or castrating the sky itself, or the sky god. And then he takes his place. And then the same thing happens to him over and over and over again. Now, let's go back to the splitting of the mountain. I want to share some stuff with you, because this is going to get really interesting. But I do want to jump in the chat real quick. Let's see. Where is the chat? Where did I put it? Oh, here we go. Jay has a dome hat. Yeah, it's on my dome. That's my dome. Kevin Kruger says, Jay, someone I just watched use an old clip of this scientist guy talking about them knowing that the moon isn't physical and made of plasma. Yes, I've seen that one a billion times. And the scientist is right. I believe. I totally think that the moon's made of plasma too. I think it's a light. I think it's an image in the sky. I think that it represents an actual physical object that is outside of our sky, but we get a glimpse of it, like looking through a peephole and we see the moon. But yeah, that's a good one too. And do share that so that others can see it too. Who else we got in the chat? Cheech McDuck says, yes, you can see through the moon during the day. Yeah, I totally agree. You can totally see through it. It's crazy. All right, let's check out this concept. Remember how I showed you that there's a story of Hercules. He erects these pillars. Traditionally, it's only really 2, right? Because he's not considered to be the 3rd pillar, which I believe is the secret. The secret is that Hercules himself is the 3rd pillar. He is the central pillar. That's why he's always holding on to the other 2. He's the main show, right? He's the blue beam. But then what happens is that the earth grows and possibly splits. the world as it grows and splits that mountain, or splits that middle central plasma volcano and cracks it, basically. Now, this is just a theory that I've been working on, but I want to show you where I'm going with this. So let me get some pictures pulled up here. Boom, put up the picture frame. All right, cool. Now let's pull up a different set of pictures here. This one? Nope. Sorry, one second. There's a lot of files on my computer, and they're all separated in different ways. All right, so let me just pull up some different images. I'm in my plasma volcano folder here on my computer, and I want to show you some images and some symbolic images of like the split mountain. We'll start with this one. Looks pretty good, actually. Boom. Okay, so this would be an example, right? Obviously, this is just some fantastic wallpaper drawing that some awesome artist drew on the internet. So shout out to whoever did that one. As you can see, the mountain there is split. It's got a blue beam coming right up out of it, right? This survives in our collective subconscious, and so we draw it. We tap into these things. Those of us who are more artistically inclined, it seems to me, tend to be a little more in tune with the esoteric and occult story that we collectively have forgotten. So those artists tend to be some of the best sources for me whenever I'm doing my research, right? So that I personally can stay balanced with what is considered to be fact and official and academic and whatever, with what is considered to be fiction and creative and explorative, right? Let's see. These are just volcanoes. Let me get to the split mountain. Here we go. So this is from Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite Legend of Zelda games ever. And as you can see, there's the dueling peaks, as they're called, right there. A split right down the middle of the mountain. Here's another example from some other video game I've never even played. But as you can, there's an uncanny resemblance there between the two, wouldn't you say? But it doesn't stop there. Oh no, we've got a lot more different examples and images of the whole split mountain idea. This one's from Halo. Check that out. They have a split mountain, right? One side being a little bit longer than the other side. This is a little screenshot that I took from whenever I broke down the movie Encanto. Remember we saw the split mountain symbolism in Encanto? Here it is again in Encanto. X Hunter X. Okay, finally, right? All the people who have been recommending, like, you got to watch X Hunter X. Okay, finally, it comes up in my research. This is also called the Split Mountain in an anime called X Hunter X, which has a lot of symbolism. Hold on, let me read this comment. Freya J. Rose says, I don't know if you remember me, Jay, but I check on you often, and I told you a long time ago that your channel, my brother JD, that you channel my brother JD. Oh yeah, right on. Well, it's nice to meet you again. All right, so jumping back in here, we got The Witcher, right? We got the split mountain symbolism in The Witcher. This one's also an artist representation. The old TV show, Twin Peaks. I don't know like how old all of you are. I never watched this show. I was never into drama and never into soap opera type whatever. I understand, I believe, rumor has it was a really good show for various reasons. I was just never into it, but I promise you that's what the symbolism here is, the Twin Peaks in the show. Here's some other examples of the split towers, or the split mountain, as they say. Now this one's very interesting. This is a Titan Jesus, basically, that somebody drew, standing with 1 foot on one side of some land that has opened up, and 1 foot on the other. This comes from a verse in the Bible. Now check this out, and keep in mind the story of Hercules splitting the mountain, right? This is from Zechariah 14:4 in the King James Version of the Bible, and it says, "And his feet," talking about Jesus, let's go back. "His feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the middle toward the east and towards the west. There shall be a very great valley, and a half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, which would be closer to like the middle, and a half of it shall be removed to the south. So in the Bible itself, it says that when Jesus returns to this world, right, and reemerges, that the mountain of olives, which is an olive tree growing in the middle of this mountain with little balls on it, which the balls are the little torrents and eddies from the plasma that shoots up from the main trunk of the tree of life, basically, right? That mountain is split in half, and that Jesus is seen standing upon it with 1 foot on one side and 1 foot on the other side, which is very interesting. Where did the feet come from, though, right? Basically, you've got the 3 beams that are shooting up, right? The beam on this side has a mountain. The beam on this side has a mountain, right? They shoot up, and over time, they become attracted to the central beam, right? So they sort of branch inward to create legs, and they all meet in the middle, where the 2 towers become one, basically, or all 3 of them become one. It's the 3-in-1 symbolism, and the 2 towers combining symbolism as well. Joni's in the chat and says X Hunter X, or Hunter X Hunter. Oh yeah, Jay, my son says he's cracking up. That's funny. All right, so let's see, what else do I have here for you guys? One moment. How do you guys like all my shorter videos I've been working on lately? I've been staying up. I don't know if you can tell, I'm kind of tired, but I've been staying up late every day, piecing together and editing videos and stuff, because I know some people appreciate whenever I just get right to the point and just boom, give you something to check out for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then go, which I totally respect. So I'm working on that for a lot of people too, so we can do our live streams and have short breadcrumbs as well. Now let's check out something else that's very interesting. As I say hello to Sharon, Sharon says, Jay, Tartarian history says that the Rock of Gibraltar was split open, flooding all from the oceans. Once chaos settled, the mud was left that covered the world. Oh, right on. I don't believe in the Rock of Gibraltar story, but I believe there's truth there. I totally do. The Rock of Gibraltar to me does not look like a column whatsoever. It does not look like a pillar. It doesn't look like anything except for a mountain that has been touched by the powerful electric snakes that come down from the sky from time to time. Where was I? Hold on, one second. I'm going to do some screen sharing here. There we go. All right, now let's check this out. I put a reference to this on my website. I'm going to go into more detail, though, whenever I talk about... I'm going to add a section about... totally covering like pillar worship and things of that nature, which, by the way, when I talk about pillar worship, I'm not impressed. I know everyone likes to joke around and say, oh, it looks like a human body part or whatever, right? And they become very sexual with it, and everyone chimes in every time. And I used to do that too. But I'm not, I don't think they're funny jokes at all. Like, it doesn't upset me or anything if people are like, oh, it's a penis or whatever. It's actually just, it kind of disappoints me, honestly, that so many people's minds go to that instead of going to something so much deeper and grander in the great scale of things. But mankind has done that all throughout time and history, has attributed the worshiping of these light pillars, these light beams that shoot up from the ground, as human anatomy parts. You know what I mean? Everything is connected. Everything is related and correlated, but I'm not super impressed by those kinds of jokes. So if you want, that's your deal. But I'm never going to make that correlation. I will never come on here and say that obelisks are the penis of Osiris or something retarded like that, because I don't believe that whatsoever. And I believe that there are people who do believe that, but I don't think that's where it originally came from. I think it was distorted and warped and changed into that over time. I think the reality is much more pure. So let's go to something called Iram. Iram of the Pillars. Iram is the name of a lost and legendary Arabic city, just like Atlantis or many of the other lost cities across time, right? This place is actually called Iram of the Pillars. Very interesting. Let's check this out. It's also known as Iram, Ubar, and the city of the pillars mentioned in the Quran. Here's what the Quran says. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ad, with the Ad? The Ad are the people who lived, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's probably Yad, if I were to guess. But the Yad are the people that lived in this legendary lost city. And they were wiped out by a storm. A storm happened and poof, blew them all away. Imagine that. Have you not considered how your Lord dwelt with Yad, Iram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the lands? You see that? There's this magical, mythical city that disappeared, right? That once had these huge pillars that rose up into the sky. Now, people will shrink these pillars in their minds because they can't conceive of an object that physically connects the earth to the sky. So they shrink these things down in their mind, just like we have shrank Hercules down into being the size of a regular person. Whenever you see him on the movies and stuff, he's never big enough to just hold up the sky, unless he grows for a moment and then shrinks or whatever. Anyways, Iram of the pillars I thought was really interesting. It says that this city had lofty pillars, great sky beams, I would call them, that rose up into the sky, and that's what they were known for. And then there was a storm, and the storm blew everything away, and people assume that this legendary city, this Arabic city, was lost under the sands, that somehow the sands had covered up the city, which is highly possible that the sands have done that, because I believe that there's going to be millions of pounds and tons of sand that's sucked up into the air, into the sky, in the tempest that's created by the depressurization event. So it is possible that it could have been covered up in sand, but I believe it's talking about the North Pole, which right now seems to be flooded, might be covered up in water. But that's an interesting reference. Here's another one, too, to when the earth is divided. It's from the Bible as well. It's the mention of a person, allegedly, named Peleg. And this is one of those interesting things. When you're in the Old Testament of the Bible and you get to the really boring parts where it's just name after name and it's just whole list of family genealogies and you're like, I get it, you had a big family, right? Every once in a while they stop listing names and they point out somebody, and they usually give a reason as to why their name was called that. And it has something to do with some significant event that happened in the earth's history. This Peleg is referenced in the Bible. And it says, let's see if we can find it here. Hey, what's up, Bernhard? Welcome. Where is it? Anyways, it's very short. It just says that the earth was divided in his time. So people argue over that, and they think like, oh, it's spiritually divided, or oh, it's the languages were all divided, or whatever, which there may be truth to much of that. But I feel like we're too quick, typically, right? There's a such thing as being too focused on just the actual physical and not enough spiritual. But there's also a such thing as being too spiritual and too metaphoric, right? Using too many metaphors and like, well, maybe like, you know what I mean? Like people will explain it away and make it all internal instead of acknowledging that the physical external world represents the internal. So they must reflect one another and balance each other out perfectly, right? But yeah, when the world was split, possibly because it is growing. Now, I copied the text, Iram of the pillars, in Arabic, right? Let me grab it here. Let's figure out what it says. So I'm going to Google Translate. I'm going to put Arabic on this side and we'll punch it in. Hebrew on the other side because I'm more familiar with Hebrew. Now, this is the Hebrew. Check this out. I'm going to copy this. Boom. I'm going to switch them up to put Hebrew on this side, but then I'm going to change this to English right here. And this is the translation in English, right? From Iram of the pillars, which is written in Arabic right above. It says, throw away that baptizer. I swear that's exactly what it says in Arabic instead of like Iram of the pillars whenever you copy and paste it. Throw away the baptizer. Well, that's interesting. What would that possibly refer to, right? The baptizer is one that covers in water, okay? the one that drowns. It doesn't have to be drowned, but the one that covers in water, basically. That's what it means to be baptized. But it says to throw away the baptizer. Get rid of the one that covers in water. So what does baptize mean, right? It means to immerse or to dip into the water. Now remember, the mountains where these light beams come from, they're known as being the mountains that are come up out of the water. The Hermes, right? The mountain of the ocean, the mountain of the sea, the mountain that comes up out of the sea, right? The mountain that might be down inside of the sea right now. Could be flooded, could be totally underwater right now. And then whenever the ocean waters get sucked up into the sky, the mountain is revealed once more. People go there and they set up camp or whatever. I don't know. It might be there. It might be underwater. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting to get rid of those waters, basically, right? Hermes, Trismegistus, right? The thrice great, or Megistus. Mag also is related to the word mountain, I believe, and magic and magi and magic coming from the mountains and from the caves and things like that. Hermes, we have basically any word that starts with har, H-A-R. Right? Sometimes H-E-R, sometimes H-I-R, but the H and the R together typically indicate some sort of a mountain happening. And Hercules, Har, right? Anyways, kind of the same thing. Let me jump into the chat and say hello to everybody. There we go. Boom. Alex Hoyle says, I think these structures have been built as a male and female energy. Okay, that's possible too. Now, you know what? That's what I wanted to show you. I want to show you the location where I believe these other two plasma volcanoes are on each side of the island up at the North Pole. So let me get that pulled up here real quick. I've shown it before, most notably on my video I did called The Rod God. All right, so let's see. We're going to go to North Pole maps. Is that where it is? Yes, it is. All right, cool. So let's see. Which one? Well, here's a few different examples, right? There's the North Pole. You can see I circled it there at the top of the world on these old maps. There it is again. This is not what I'm looking for. Sorry, one second. There it is. Okay, so here's an example from like the Lord of the Rings, which is totally symbolic of what we're talking about. Now, on a real map, here we go. This is the one I wanted to show you here. So on this one, you can see that they have the in the middle, I drew sort of the imagery of the plasma volcano that should be there, which is covered up by this giant star symbol. But then over here, if I could show you, let's zoom in on it. We can see this is the island at the North Pole. This is a real old ancient map. Over here, we've got this pillar with a circle right in the middle of it too. And it literally says magnetic mountain, like basically right there. So when you zoom in on it, that's what you can see. The other one is right here. And they're on each side. As you can see, there's one over here and there's one over here. Now imagine that these are plasma volcanoes as well, smaller ones, and that they may be even remnants of the older one, right? Because if the world grows outwards, it makes sense that those tunnels within the earth would also grow outward and split and stuff too. But you can imagine these, right? Shooting their beams up into the sky and creating fantastic imagery for us to interpret and to tell stories about from age to age. And sometimes they're shown just little pieces of them. Here's another one you could see if we zoom in on that. The actual North Pole is up here. If you could see further up into the middle of the island there. But it's got one of the plasma volcanoes off to the side. Here's one where you can see it on both sides. Here's one where it's called Vitsark. Interesting. Looks like a horn or something. Usually these are depicted as being very steep, like cliffs that just jet up out of the ocean. Anyways, interesting stuff. All right, let me get out of there. And yeah, that's pretty much my presentation. So I hope that you guys got something out of that one. I had so much fun researching the Pillars of Hercules, and I highly encourage you to do your research too. Do your own research and check out if there is something to this ancient worship of the sky columns, right? The sky columns that shrank over time, the further away from the reset event that we got, the more we cartoonified these columns, and the more the story sort of changes, like an eternal game of telephone, right? Where this slightly changes over time the more you tell the story. But I feel like I've got more substance to the backstory and to the origins. And I feel like the more that we come together and share our individual research and think outside of the box and say, what if? And then we think about the implications of what if, we can put a lot more pieces of the bigger picture together. Right on. Well, hey, thanks for joining me. Tomorrow I'm going to break down the movie The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where we're going to talk about the two tower symbolism, as well as a whole bunch of other really cool stuff. Thanks for all of your support, too. I super appreciate everyone. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. And until next time, well, I might as well say, please visit my website. Check it out. I did write a pretty sweet book about the plasma apocalypse and the cyclical resetting of our world. I don't feel like I plug myself enough when it comes to that. So yes, please do check out my website. You can talk to me too. If you ever want to send me a text or whatever. Actually, I have a tier now, for channel supporters, who you can actually text message me and get my phone number and send me text and talk to me about ideas you have and stuff. Or you can just go onto the website, and the members of the website have a little chat box where you can talk to each other. Or you can just message me directly, and I usually check that once a day and reply to everybody. So yeah, check it out. Let me know if you like it, what you like about it. And, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.